Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here today for the introduction to the new photoFXlab. Basically what photoFXlab is a hub for everything Topaz, and it definitely has some really good features in there as well, but we really wanted to streamline your workflow with your Topaz plugins because we do have quite a few of them, and really get you quick access into those and give you the opportunity to search all of your Topaz plugins effects in a searchable library without having to access them. So it's really good for those who are just wanting to apply certain effects. If you have your certain favorites, then you can just apply that, work with it in a layered workflow, do some blending options within your layers palette, and you're done that quickly. Or you can actually go into your plugins in a very quick way and make each and every adjustment your own, and then save that back to the photoFXlab. Some new features that were introduced within photoFX are the InstaTone technology, which is a way to get inspired by images and see how that tone might look on your image, and then be able to apply that tone and use blending options to really make it your own tone as well, so you can achieve really unique looks with InstaTone. We'll go over that. Another recent technology that was implemented with version 1.1.1 is the IntelliColor technology. IntelliColor really is a way, it's a new development in color technology developed by our guys here, and it's something that allows for really natural color adjustments as you change your exposure and your contrast. Usually when you're changing your exposure or contrast or anything that's brightening or darkening your image, changes in saturation will occur, and that is not the case within photoFXlab, so I'll show you some of that today. We have selective adjustment brushes. That's one of the most requested things amongst our users after seeing that implemented within Adjust 5 and black and white effects. So we put that into the photoFXlab, and so we'll go over that today as well. But more than just the selective adjustment brushes, it's the Edgeware technology of those brushes. It is still in the selective adjustment brushes, and we've taken it a step further and given you that Edgeware brush for masking tools. Again, I did mention kind of a layered workflow, so we do have a layered workflow with masking and editing tools that we'll go over. So let's just go ahead and hop on into the program, because that's really the best way to get to know it. Get out of here. All right, today I will be working in photoFXlab in a standalone application. It is a standalone application, and you can also access it as a plugin through the host programs that you're able to access the rest of your Topaz plugins through. So Photoshop Elements, Photoshop, Aperture, Lightroom, iPhoto, PaintShop Pro, all of those compatible hosts are still compatible with photoFXlab. There are some new compatibility requirements that many of you may already be aware of, that you can check out online, and I'll show you that shortly. But basically, you'll need to have a graphics card that supports OpenGL technology 2.1 and above. So that's really the only major difference you need to be aware of, and most people are able to run it without issue. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about photoFXlab. I'm just going to open an image here, and we'll grab an image here that might work. Let's do this Fountain of St. Michel. Okay, so I'm just opening that image on up, and we'll start there. I do want to come over to the lower right-hand side, the Layers palette first, because I'm going to be using this as I go through all of the rest of the features, and because I am, we'll just start there in the lower right. This is the first program of Topaz where we do have a layered workflow. The reason is because Topaz Remask, does not work without a layered program. So currently it only, or before photoFXlab, it only worked within Photoshop Elements, Photoshop, and PaintShop Pro. Well, we had a bunch of users that use Aperture, Lightroom, iPhoto, other programs that don't have layers, and they weren't able to access their remask. So now you are, because you can now go first into photoFXlab, then into remask, and you can still be doing this through your Aperture, Lightroom, iPhoto, etc. So that's really why we put this in here. That's one of the biggest requests from our Lightroom users, is they want to be able to use that remask. So we do have that implemented here. We've simplified it down from a normal layers workflow. However, you'll see a lot of things that are similar. You have an opacity adjustment here. You have different blending modes. And then you have the layer itself. To make a duplicate of the layer, you just come down to duplicate, and you'll see a second layer created. Now on this first layer, I'm just going to take this temperature really up high, and so you can see what happens here. Each layer is going to have a little eyeball, and that when you click it on and off, when it's on, you'll be able to actually be viewing the layer that you're on. When you click it off, that layer will become invisible, and you'll view the layers below. So that's what's happening there. Then we have an actual image thumbnail, so that's pretty standard. And then you'll see this white box. This is your masking. This is your actual image or layer mask. We'll go over that here in just a bit. And then you have your name of the layer, which you can go in and name yourself and change yourself. You have the opacity again, which will allow you to make your layer somewhat translucent at any point, so you can kind of really have good blending options here. As you take that from 0 to 100, you can see how that's kind of blending with that really warm layer underneath. And then you have blending modes. We'll go over this a little bit more, but basically what a blending mode is it tells the layer that you're on how to kind of react with the layer below it. So a couple of my favorites are going to be the overlay and soft light. I tend to use those quite a bit, but you can tell how different it is with all of these layers by just scrolling over them, or all of these blending modes. The different blending modes can really change the way the layers react to one another. So that's something fun to look at as well. Then you have something called From File, From Stack. From File is going to allow you to add a new layer from an image file. So you just say From File, a navigation window will pop up, and you'll be able to navigate to an image that you want to bring in. Maybe here, say open, and then in your layer stack, that new image layer is there for you. And you just can click it on and off, change the opacity to kind of bring back in the layers underneath. This is great for composites when you're actually trying to combine multiple images, such as maybe you're trying to replace the background of a certain image. This is great when using that. Now I'm going to take this down to about 50% and show you what this From Stack layer, or From Stack, does. When you press From Stack, it's very similar to the stamp layer within Photoshop. It's going to take a look at the layer you're on and all the layers below and make a stamp of all of those layers. So now you'll see, let me turn this off. Here we have all of the individual layers. But if I now turn this top one on, which is my stamp layer, and all these ones off below, you'll see that this layer is 100%, and it just took kind of a snapshot of what I was looking at below. And now I have this new layer to work on. And you'll see the advantage of that as we go through a couple workflows here in just a minute. Then we have duplicate, which you saw me use a minute ago, and delete. Delete's pretty obvious. You can just delete your layers. And then if you come over here to your little tool wheel, it's just a couple different tools. You can move up and down with your up and down arrows, or by clicking on these move up, move down. And you can also merge layers, but I always choose to go with Control E if I want to merge two layers together. All right, so that is your layers palette. Now that we've looked at all of that, we can start with the fun stuff. Okay, so I've made a duplicate layer. I'm back to normal. They're the exact same layer. And we're going to come over here to the top left to really start looking at the different features. Here we have our Effects tab. Our Effects tab is the searchable library of effects that I was talking about. photoFXlab with version 1.1.1 will recognize what Topaz plugins you have already installed on your system. Please note that it will only recognize the latest plugins, so if you have Topaz Adjust 4, that's not going to be recognized, only Topaz Adjust 5 is. The good thing about Topaz is we are free upgrades, so you can just download the latest version and it'll be recognized within your Effects and Plugins tab. With the Effects tab, it will show 6 different programs of ours. 4 of the programs, InFocus, Denoise, Remask, and DJPEG, are more really technology-based, and they have to be very specific for each particular image. So they're not really effect-based like the rest of our programs. So those won't be recognized or those presets won't be put into the effects category. What will be, let me show you here. I'm going to go by product. The products that are shown, all the effects, are Adjust, Black and White, Clean, Detail, Lens Effects, and Simplify. So if you want to see all of the Adjust 5 default presets, you can just click on Adjust. Or if you want to see all of the black and white ones, you can just click on Black and White. And those are the only ones that will be shown. And you can just scroll down and look at all of those. It's very easy to go through all of these. Let's continue to show you how this library works first. You can do by product, by keywords, by favorites. You can easily select favorite ones just by clicking on the little star. So let's say this, oops, let me cancel. I'll show you this here in just a second. Let's say this cyanotype cerulean, or we'll go down here, cerulean Cambridge, because it actually is one of my favorites. If I want to stick it into my favorites category, I can just click on the little star and then go to by favorites or my favorites, and I'll see it in my favorites now. You can also do by category, so if you want to do by black and white, by more stylized painterly effects, HDR, etc., etc., by product, and then you can show them all. I'm going to go back up to my favorites, or we'll go to keywords. Keywords is really nice because you can just look up certain keywords. So let's say I want to have a platinum effect applied to my image. I can just look up platinum, and all of my platinum black and white effects will be here for me to look at, and I can just click on the first one. When you click on the effect, a preset preview will show up. You can see a standard before and after image that is kind of the stock that we've put into the program, but I find I usually like to preview it with my own photo, so I just come down here to the lower left corner, say preview with my own photo, and I'll see my actual image with this Platinum 1 preset. You'll see a little description of what each preset is, and to scroll to the next without having to exit the preset preview, you can just go to next, and you'll see all of these different platinum effects and how they would be applied to my current image. If I find something that I like, I think I liked this one so far. Okay, so this is the Platinum 3 preset. I can say apply effect, and it will be applied to the layer that I'm on. Once it's actually been applied, you can then go into your opacity and go to your blending modes and play with those as well. And then come up to your adjustments, maybe add a little dynamics. You'll see that I really love this slider as I go through this presentation. And it's as quick as that. You now have that Platinum 3 preset and you're good to go. However, some people, myself included, want to go into the plugins and make this very unique to their own. They don't want to necessarily use just the effects. So the next tab over is where, let's delete this layer here, make another duplicate. The next tab over is the Plugins tab. Here you can access all of the installed plugins that are on your system. So currently I have 8 plugins installed on this computer. If I want to go into my Topaz black and white effects, I can just say Start Plugin. It will pop up immediately, and I have my Topaz black and white effects to play with. Here I might go into my Platinum collection, and I could still start off at a preset, maybe my Platinum 3 still, come into all of my adjustments here, work with it, make it really my own this way. Then once I'm happy, I can say OK and then bring it back into photoFXlab, and again this will be applied to the layer that I was on. Again, it is people have been asking, it doesn't recognize my adjust 3, it doesn't recognize my simplify 2. That's because it's not going to recognize the previous plugin versions. It's only going to recognize the latest versions. That's good to know. All right, so let's delete that and we'll move on to one of my favorites, the InstaTone. The InstaTone, again, is a quick way to apply tone from another image to your image to see how it looks. So we've provided several different libraries here for you to look at or look through. 3 of them are internet-based, and then 2 of them, well, we'll just go through. Here we have the top 2 is 500pix.com and 1x.com. If it says needs internet, you're going to need an internet connection to actually look through these areas. So all you have to do is take a look at some of these, and if anything just pops out at you and you think, I want to see how that tone looks on my image over here on the left, you can just click on the thumbnail, and all that tone will be reconfigured on your image, and you'll see how it's applied. If you like how the tone looks, which I kind of do right here, but you still want to continue searching because that's the most fun part of the whole process, you can say remember, and what it will do is remember a thumbnail of the larger image that you had just checked to apply that tone, so you can always go back to it. It can remember up to 6 thumbnails. So as you scroll down again, you can just continue seeing if something might apply and look good, and you'll again see that tone applied over here. 1x.com is basically the same, and again you will need an internet connection to look through the 1x.com site. The great thing about 500pix and 1x is you really do have very inspirational images here that will constantly change and keep adding new pictures each day, as they always do. So you can just click and see if it looks good on your image. Again, if it's something you like, you can remember it. One thing I always tell people is, or I want you to remember actually, is that what it's actually looks like over here. Ooh, I like that one. That was this tree image. I'm going to say remember. Think about it as just a starting point, because obviously another image's tone is not necessarily going to look great on your image. You're going to need to make it your own and blend it with your original image and do some other things to it. Sometimes you're lucky and it really looks amazing, but majority of the time I find that I go back into my layers palette and I blend it. And so that's what we're going to do here, but I do want to show you the photo library. This is just, you will not need an internet connection for this one. Your photo library will is the default Topaz library from our Topaz users, some of our Topaz pros, and then some stock imagery as well. You can just click, and if it's something you enjoy, again, you can press remember. Web image search is something where you will need to have internet again, and it's basically just a search engine. So if I say I want to look at the fountains, something along those lines, it'll pull up all of these images of fountains, and I can select one, see how it might look on my image. If I like it, again, press remember. I don't really like that one, so we're just going to keep going. You also have My Photo Source. My Photo Source allows you to select your own photo source. So maybe I'll come in here, go to my webinars, go to my photoFXlab, select that folder. It's going to pull up all of the images within that particular folder, so it's really easy to be consistently and apply the same tone over and over to certain images without having to go in and make an action or anything like that at this point. So that's kind of fun too. I think I like this tree. Yes. Once you're happy, all you say is apply to layer, and it'll be applied to that particular layer. Again, this isn't ready yet. You can change your opacity, blend it in with your original image, come up into your adjustments and work with that and really change it that way. But you get the idea. You can really make it your own this way, and then you've taken that tone and applied it to yours in a very unique way. Here's before, here's after. Moving on, we have our History tab. The History tab is basically the same as any other History tab, as it's going to allow you to go anywhere within your history of this particular image since we brought it in, and get back to where you want it to be. So here we could go back to when I was at the black and white effects, and then it takes me back to black and white effects, and then it says apply effect platinum, platinum 3. We could go back to that where we were there, and then we can come back to the beginning, or I'm sorry, the end where we just were. Just know that once you go back to a certain point, so I'm going back to the very beginning, and you start over, or you have something highlighted and you continue working, all of your history will be erased and you'll start a new history. So that's what we've done here. All right, moving on to our right. We are going to kind of come over here to this first tool. This is our crop tool. The reason I'm in standalone mode for this particular introduction is because there are a couple features that you cannot use when it's accessed as a plugin. One of them is the crop tool, which we do have for you in the standalone application. So if you do want to crop your image, it's quite easy. If you want to keep your proportions, all you have to do is click the little link. That'll keep your proportions. You come in here and type your width or your height. So let's say I wanted 3,500. Just press enter, my height will automatically be generated, and then I have this proportional image. If you don't want that, you can just uncheck and move it around to exactly the crop you're looking for. Once you're happy with it, you can just press done, and that's the crop that's generated back into the main preview area. The hand tool will allow you to move your image around, kind of pan your image if you're zoomed in more than 100%. Arrows is the back and forward arrow, so this is just undo, redo. Then we have our zoom tools, zoom out and zoom in. Then we have our fit tool. The fit is going to fit your image into the preview window, and then 1-to-1 is going to go directly to 100%, so you can change that around and then go back to fit. So pretty simple stuff there. Then the X button will X out of this particular image. It will ask you if you want to save. It will not X out. This X button is not there when you're in your plugin mode, and it's not, you don't have the ability to save when you're in your plugin mode either, just because you're working directly from your host, so you can save from your host. Okay, then let's come over here to our right. The first tab is our Adjustments tab. The Adjustments tab is pretty basic adjustments, but with pretty awesome technology. The IntelliColor technology is the first thing we're going to talk about. You have temperature and tint for your white balance adjustment, so you can come in here and just work with that a little bit, get that to where you want it to be. And then you have saturation. The IntelliColor is also not only involved with our exposure, contrast, and dynamics adjustments, but also within the saturation adjustments. So you can saturate your image pretty extreme and still have really natural color. It's not going to start giving that fluorescent, splotchy look that you can get in areas where you have a lot of white or light colors like this sky. You can actually bring back quite a bit, and it's going to try to stay natural. That's what's great about the IntelliColor. So I am going to take this up just a little bit. Then you have your exposure, and this again is where the IntelliColor is. You can take your exposure down and up, and that RGB ratio of color is going to stay the same. So while it is an exposure adjustment, that's just something to be aware of, that you can go pretty extreme and you're not going to change your saturation levels at all. That ratio will be the same, so that's pretty cool. Take my exposure level down a little bit. Contrast, again, basic contrast. Move that down. It's going to open up everything. It's going to be lower contrast, higher contrast as you move toward the right. But again, you're not changing your saturation. It's not changing that ratio of RGB, so that's really nice. And then we have our dynamic slider. That's one of my favorite new sliders. It basically gives you that adjust type of look that you'll find in Topaz Adjust without giving you the grungy kind of dirty look that a lot of people really like in Adjust, but you have to manage in Adjust. Also, you're going to be able to come up pretty extreme with this dynamic slider without getting any halos, and you're able to really get a lot of that kind of pseudo HDR look without having to worry about anything. Let me get my exposure One of my favorite things to do is take this contrast down. The sky is pretty white, so it probably will give me a bit of a halo on this, but you could come in and work with the masking at that point very easily. So you could work with this dynamic slider, and that alone can give your image a lot of pop. So I'm a big fan of that one. All right, then we come into sharpness. Be sure to look at your image at 1:1 for the sharp. So we'll come in here. It's a really nice sharpness slider, so take that up just a little. Here's pretty high, so you can really see it. And it's not giving you any halos or anything like that with the sharpness slider. You can also use the sharpness slider as a small noise adjustment. If you're finding you have noise on one layer, you can take this down, or one area, you can take it down, and another, you can actually increase your sharpness. So that's a good use for that one as well. Let's see here. Let's go back to fit. Okay. Then we have highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. I'm a huge fan of these 4 sliders because they're very exact. So you can really adjust your highlights without affecting the rest of the image. Notice the sky, which is a little bit blown out in this particular image. You can really bring back some tone within the top area. And then over here on the right area of my fountain is where the whites are, and I can actually bring some tone back in directly into those whites without affecting the dark areas. And now I have tone within there, and it's not as blown out. It's not as clipped. Then you can adjust your shadows and your blacks, and your whites will not be affected. So here I can just bring my shadows down, maybe my blacks down, and just have really precise contrast control. And that is unique to this particular program as well. So basic adjustments, but the technology behind them is not so basic. If you want to reset them all, you can just press reset all. If you want to reset the individual ones, you can type it into 0, or you can just click, double click, and they'll all be set back to 0. All right, then we have our brushes. The brushes are our selective adjustment brushes. We have burning and dodging, saturation to add saturation or decrease the saturation, and smoothing and detail. This will allow you to add in really extra detail into certain areas. It's great for texture, and then smooth out certain areas. It's just great for skin. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and show you the burning and dodging. So we'll go ahead and click that. Burn is going to be when I take my strength lower towards that black. Dodge is going to be as I take it up towards the white. And then we're going to go pretty extreme on the burn. Then you have your brush size. As you select brush size and move it up and down, you'll see your brush actually, you'll see your brush size in comparison to your image, so you'll know exactly how to make it work. Your hardness as well. I like to take my hardness pretty down for this particular Edgeware adjustment, which we're going to go over. My flow is at 1. I'll keep it all the way up there. Now what happens with the Edgeware, if your image is not at all Edgeware, the brush is not going to recognize the edges within your image, and it'll just be what I call a dummy brush. Just give you a, I'm just clicking that over and over, it'll just give you your brush without edge detection. So you see here my crosshairs were on the sky, but it actually affected the top right of my fountain as well. Let me show you that. One big circle. Now if I reset that mask, take my Edgeware all the way up to 1, make that same adjustment all the way around, actually, sorry, all the way up there. Let's take my brush size a little bit down. So here I'm just going right along the edge of the trees, being sure to keep my crosshairs of my brush within the sky area as opposed to the fountain. Oops, I went a little bit over the edge there, but that's okay. There we are. You can see it just really fills in on these trees very easily. And you can see over here just how Edgeware it really is. So here's before, here's after. Here I've just affected my sky and nothing else. And that's really how that Edgeware technology works. So again, you have burning and dodging, saturation, desaturation, smoothing, and detail. We're going to go over that a little bit more here when we get over to the masking. So I'm going to say reset, and go to the next one, Tools. Tools, we have Rotate, Move, Scale, or Rotate, Move, and Scale. Rotate is pretty obvious. It's just going to rotate the layer that you're on, so you can just come in here and rotate. You can go back to 0 by typing it in. If you want to be really exact, you can do 0.05 or 0.5 just to get really, really small areas. You can also go 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, flip horizontally or vertically as well. You have the Move tool, which will move just your layer around. So if you want to move it to the left or move it to the right, it's very simple to do so. You just move your mouse and grab and drag. Then you can use these arrow keys or these arrow buttons for very much more precise movements. Lastly, we have Scale. Scale will allow you to go in or back out. You can actually type in the width that you want, so 5500 or something like that, and it'll go in and out, and you can scale that image within or scale the layer. Now this is really good for composites, again, when you're trying to combine multiple images, and we'll go over that here in just a sec. Lastly is our Masks tab. Actually, let's delete this and make a new layer. Okay, lastly we have our Masks tab, and here you can mask out parts of your layer so you can see the layer below, see the portion of layer below. So let's say I really wanted to, on my current layer, come into my adjustments, get some good saturation there, a little bit more contrast, or actually we'll go less contrast and more dynamic contrast. And so let's say we pushed it a little bit too far for the sky, and we want to bring in the original sky but keep our foreground. This is where a mask would be good. Now this brush menu is basically the exact same as our selective brushes, so you have your brush value, 0 being black, 255 being white. If you paint black on your white mask, it's going to be completely see-through to the next layer. If you brush white on your white mask, then you're not going to see any difference whatsoever. And we can talk about that if you have any questions here in a second. But again, you have your brush size, your hardness, the flow, and your Edgeware. And I'm going to go completely Edgeware. You can just come in here, paint back that original sky very easily without affecting anything else, without affecting that nice, bright, contrasty, dynamic foreground. And you can see the edges of my brush are going way over the edges of my fountain and trees. And again, you can see over here in the lower right on the mask how Edgeware it really is. And now only my foreground was affected. Well, that is everything basically for the interface. But I do want to just go ahead and let you know that with this program we tried to answer some of the top requests from our users over the years. Those top requests were this Edgeware technology going into the brushes that you see here in the masking and selective brushes, being able to access the plugins in a standalone application. That's probably been the #1 request over the years. Then you have the searchable library of effects, which is something that's also been highly requested by our users. And then also the layered workflow, so your Aperture, Lightroom, and iPhoto users could really take advantage of Remask, the Remask technology in Topaz Remask. So I hope this is something that will be able to streamline your Topaz workflow and really make you be able to work fast within it, and I hope you really enjoy it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I see a ton of questions coming through. Jim would like me to show the ways to either close the program or to save it. Sure. So if I wanted to at this point save this image, I could do this by going to File, Save, or Save As. I'm going to go to Save As because I want to keep my original image. And I'm just going to type this in as Michelle Fountain. I can save it as a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF file at this point. I'm going to choose TIFF. And I'm going to press Save. Each option or saving option is going to give you a secondary box of options. So here we have our TIFF options. I'm going to say no compression on my TIFF, keep it at 16-bit, keep that sRGB color space, and say OK. And it's going to save this as a TIFF file. Once it's done, it'll just be done, and then at that point you can just close out. You can stay within the interface, close out of your image, and open up a new image without having to exit out. But if you want to close down your interface, you can just come over here to the top right on a Windows or PC, and then on the top left, if you're in a Mac, you'll have that little red button. You just click that. It'll ask you if you want to save, and if you don't, you just press no, and you're good to go. Now, when you are using photoFXlab through a host, I'm just going to open up CS5 here real quick. Let's open up an image. Here's an image here. If I want to use this through a host, it's going to look a little bit different, and you'll get back to your host a little bit differently. You'll see these cancel and OK buttons up here. So if I want to change a couple adjustments real quick, nothing major because we're just showing you how to do this. Ta-da! And then you just say OK. If you don't like what you're doing and want to get back into your host without saving it or bringing it back in, the changes, then you just press cancel. So it's as easy as that. Lenny said, and I'm not sure if you guys all heard this, he had asked, and Stephanie, I believe, did answer him, but he says, will Topaz Fusion Express 2 no longer be needed? If you purchase photoFXlab, then you won't need Fusion anymore, because basically you're working in a Fusion Express Pro. You know, you have so many options within photoFXlab that there's no need for Fusion because they work the same way. You access plugins through that program. So you can access them through Fusion where you have no additional options, or you can access them through photoFXlab where you have tons of additional options. So yeah, you won't need Fusion anymore. Donnie, he actually says he's tried to bring out the blue in skies by lowering exposure, as I do in other programs, but all it does is make the sky darker gray. If I go to Nick, it brings out the blue. Any suggestions? Basically what you're seeing is that IntelliColor technology, because instead of adjusting your saturation with your exposure of your image, and that's why you're seeing that blue brighten up, is because it's adjusting the saturation along with your exposure. The photoFXlab will not do that. What it will do is it will keep the same ratio of the RGB of your original image, or it will try to do its best to do so. So you'll see a much more natural color as you change your exposure. So for example, let's show you this image. So here we don't have, I mean, it's some nice color in here, but I would increase the saturation a little bit. But if I come into my exposure, you're actually not getting any sort of color shift. Now there is, you know, you are getting lighter and darker, but that RGB ratio is staying the same, whether you go down with your exposure or up. But you can see it yourself as well. The only way that you're going to be able to really increase that saturation is actually to come up to your saturation level and increase it there. Then when you take your exposure down, you can still increase your saturation without having to do that through your exposure or contrast control. Dave says, what is meant by tone when picking from 500px? Let me press reset all here, and we'll kind of go over there. Back to the InstaTone. And if you go into 500px or 1x.com are the photo library, any of them, and you see something that kind of inspires, or you want to see how it might look on your image, you just click on that, and some of the similar tones will be applied in your image. You're not going to necessarily see the exact tones. There is some, you know, behind the scenes stuff going on, but you'll start to see kind of a similar tone. This is going to be really strong, so apologize. But see this very, very strong purple image that I just clicked on. You'll now see a lot of that purple in there as well. So this is kind of just something, a fun tool to use to kind of create, you know, very distinct looks. So if you like something like this, you can say that apply to layer. Oops. Let me go back here just a second because I forgot to make a duplicate. Now I can say apply to my layer. And I always say I rarely find something in InstaTone that is going to be perfect for my image because, again, another image's tone isn't necessarily going to be perfect for my image. So I usually like to come in here and just kind of start a certain type of look or a feel to the image and then make it my own by working with the blending layers. Maybe you can come into working with the overlay or the soft light as opposed to the normal, and that's going to blend it in a completely different way. Here's before, here's after, versus the normal, which is a little much for me. So that's where that's what it kind of means by tone, is just kind of the colors that are coming through. Donnie says, this part of the webinar is what I was referring to above. When I use a brush to try and bring out more blue in the sky, all it does is make it a darker gray. How can I bring out the blue in the sky with the brush? For that, you would use the saturation brush. Let me go ahead and put this to about 50% opacity. So here's before, here's after. And now I'm going to make a from stack layer, which is going to make a new layer that combines these two layers below. So now you'll see that pop up here, and I can work on this top layer at 100% opacity and go to my brushes. So most likely what you're doing is you're working with the burn dodge tool as opposed to the saturation tool. So you can just click on the saturation brush, make that strength more saturated by going to the right. So if we want to go with the sky to be more blue, come here. Let's take our brush size pretty up, hardness down, flow is up, Edgeware completely up, and hardness needs to go down. Okay, here I'm actually clicking through the trees right now into the sky, just clicking on the blue. As long as your crosshairs are on the color that you want to affect, let's go really extreme with this so you can really see how Edgeware this can get. Okay, again, I'm just clicking on the sky itself. Here I'm going onto the clouds here, but get the idea. Clicking through the trees, so easily can get that sky completely, even through the little tiny holes in the trees. So that's what's good. All around those edges. And so that saturation brush is what you're wanting to work with, Donnie, not the dodge and burn. The dodge and burn is specifically for dodging and burning, making things darker or lighter, and because of that IntelliColor technology, it's not going to increase the saturation. Only working with the saturation will increase that saturation. Just wanted to show off that Edgeware brush one more time. If you'll notice down here in the right-hand side of this actual brush layer, you can see how effective this Edgeware technology can be on certain images. I was able to quickly get between every nook and little cranny here that quickly with that Edgeware technology, and it looks very natural. I love that brush. All right, let's see what other questions we have going here. Stephen says, how do you cut and paste layers in? Stephen, you don't cut and paste layers in, you just add it from the file. So for this particular image, or from the layers palette, all you say is from file, and then you can just select what image you might want to bring in, click on it, and then it's brought into your layers stack here, and you can work with it from there. You can also delete it from there, from down here on the layers palette, or you can come up here into your layer menu up on the upper left, and you can say delete layer here. You can also say new from image, which will again allow you to bring in a new image. Tanya says, can you show an example using FX as an external editor from Lightroom? Sure, not a problem. Press cancel. And I'm just going to open up Lightroom 4. And you can do it from your library or your develop area. This is my baby that's actually floating in a sky. I was showing how to mask. But let's say you wanted to open up this image. You can just right click and go edit in and go to either your 64-bit photo effects or your 32-bit. I'm going to go to 64-bit. It'll pop up here with an option to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, which I usually do. Now we have that particular image coming in from Lightroom. You can press OK, cancel, or whatnot, and it'll get back into your library in your Lightroom. Urban says, can InstaTone only be used on the whole picture or also on a selection using masks? Urban, because it is being used on a layer, so over here in our InstaTone, open that up, choose my new favorite for the day, say apply to layer, and do some opacity, or even not. Let's leave it full strength, and let's say I don't want it on my clouds or something. You can then come over to your masks tab and paint directly on that layer. It's very easy just to affect a certain part of the image and not the whole thing. So I can come in here and take that brush value, brush size up, and paint back in certain areas that I don't want it to be affected by the InstaTone. And I don't have to paint it back in full strength either. If I only want certain amounts of the transparency to show through on my mask, I can do that by changing my brush value. Avi says, if using brush with Edgeware on part of the image or on part of the image and other part without Edgeware, will it work as applied to different areas? Sure, you can change that Edgeware very easily. So let's reset this. This isn't my favorite. I don't know that I can look at that very much longer. So let's just do a quick adjustment here and then paint some stuff out and in. So if I want to do some dynamics there, take my contrast out a little, maybe even take my saturation up a little bit more, and take my highlights down and my whites. Let's say I want my original color of the sky to be this layer underneath, not as blue. So I can easily do that with the Edgeware brush. So we're keeping it completely Edgeware, and I'm just going to click on the blue, still keep my clouds nice and puffy, and the detail change there. We are changing a couple things here, but I can get that original sky color back pretty easily using that Edgeware. And then if I want to come in and not have Edgeware on the same layer, just come in and take some color out of my water, my foreground a little bit. I don't want it to be Edgeware because I want to do it to my whole foreground. You can see over here on the mask area over to the right that it was not Edgeware at all. It's just a basic brush across that foreground, and you can use that all on the same layer. So it does not matter, Avi, if it's Edgeware or not. You can change that during the whole process. Lean, great question. She says, are there two separate versions of the program needed to use it as a standalone and as a plugin from Lightroom? No, ma'am. All you have to do is download what you want for your operating system, whether that's 32-bit, 64-bit, or both, or Mac, and you can then access it as both a standalone and a plugin within that one download link. So you don't need to. And I have quite a few people ask about that as far as purchasing goes, if they need to purchase the standalone or plug-in version, and there is no difference because you can just purchase it and it'll work as both. Mike says, when would you use a 32-bit, or when would you use 32-bit as opposed to 64-bit in a Windows environment? Okay, so let's say you have a 64-bit operating system. You use Photoshop Elements. Photoshop Elements only accesses 32-bit programs, so that is a big reason to use 32-bit within your 64-bit environment. Other than those type of situations where the programs themselves that you use on your 64-bit Windows don't access your 64-bit version for some reason of photoFXlab, then you'd need that 32-bit version of photoFXlab on your system as well. If all of the programs that you do use are 64-bit, such as CS6 or etc., then I would just try to use my 64-bit because it's going to get me a little bit better memory and a little bit faster as well. Sydney says, what's the main difference between the mask brush and a remask add-on? Sydney, the main difference is remask uses a trimap technology. So let's take this image, for example. Let me delete this layer, say duplicate. Let's say I just wanted to change the sky and I wanted to, okay, I'm going to do a couple things here real quick. Let me just add one of my favorite effects. It's going to be in my favorites, and it's my photo pop. And of course it's not there, so I'll just look up by keyword and look up pop and try to find it really quickly. Where are you? There it is. Okay, I'm just going to say apply because I know it usually does a really good job. Let's say I've applied this image or applied the preset. So here's before and here's the photo pop preset, but I don't like what it did to the sky. Here in my masking, my Edgeware, I could come in and just come along this edge in a very small way and just do on this one blue. But then it's almost so close to this other blue that sometimes it might not recognize it as an edge. So those are some problems you might run into with the Edgeware technology. You might not get that clean edge if it's the colors somewhat similar. That's where Remask is going to be really helpful to go into really quickly and get a very clean cut mask without having to keep that super Edgeware. So here I could just come across my horizon. Green is for keep, red is for cut, blue is for compute. I could just come into my fill bucket. So here just say compute mask, and then I have this really clean cut horizon super quickly to say okay, and I have it ready to go. And I didn't have to sit here and mess with my Edgeware trying to get super in close to this and knowing the blue isn't going to give, because it's right next to the blue of the water, might not give me a very clean mask right off the bat. But as you could tell in the previous, let me close this out. No. Let me open, I believe it was, this was a good example of how quickly we were able to change, well, let's try to do the saturation again. Between these trees, between these little tree limbs, because it's based off a color. As long as the crosshairs of your brush are on the color that you want to change, you can easily come in, it'll just affect that color, and it'll be very exact. And it's really great, you know, for these type of images, you can get exact types of things without having to take it into Remask. And Remask is going to take a little bit more effort to come in and do the green keep, red cut, blue compute, like this type of image. It would take a much longer time in Remask. You know, this would be a good 2-minute, 3-minute thing, where this took literally, you know, 20 seconds for us to just click in a few spots, and you have a very clean-cut, good-looking mask, as you can tell down here in the lower right. So both of those masking technologies are going to be beneficial in different types of situations, is what I'm finding. I'm finding that for really simple stuff, for the Remask, it's really great on things where it might be more difficult for the Edgeware. And then if you have something like this, a complicated mask that has clear-cut colors that are going to be recognizable by this Edgeware technology, it's so much faster just to use this masking technology. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for joining me here today for the Introduction to photoFXlab.